Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the wonderful Michelle Kirk. And we are going to be talking about essential empath survival tools, skills, and strategies. And I've been looking forward to this talk, so I'm feeling very grateful that you're here, Michelle, because a lot of us empaths out there, when we don't really know that we are an empath, or we don't really know what that means or how to really survive in our life, then it feels like we are struggling and we think, oh my God, why am I feeling so much? And how am I, protecting myself from taking over other people's energies, and a whole lot of other things that we will be talking about. And we will be sharing how to handle all of these things. So I'm thinking this is going to be incredibly valuable. So thank you so much for being here today, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this.
Right, me too. So we already did a little bit of a pre-talk, and we are both empaths, and that means that there was a time in our life when we didn't really know that we were an empath or what it means to be an empath. Do you remember that time?
I do remember that time, and it was really a difficult time because I felt so different than other people, and I didn't understand why I was feeling the way that I was. And honestly brought, some depression and anxiety along with it because I was feeling so much all the time. And others around me didn't seem to be having the same effect as me. So it was very challenging until I really learned how to manage that, which was a process, and it did not happen overnight. I had to really learn from other people and, first of all, figure out what the heck was going on.
Yes. Yeah, but that's exactly what happened, right? If you were like me, and you viewers and listeners out there are like me, then I used to think that everybody was more or less the same. Of course, there was a difference between male and female, but I thought, in general, everybody is more or less the same. So I thought that everything that was happening to me was also sort of happening to other people. And then you enter in the phase where you discover, oh no, people tell you, oh, but you're so sensitive, or you really need to grow a thicker skin, or don't take everything so personal. And you think, okay, interesting. And then an important thing to realize is that we are like, when we haven't learned to manage this yet, we are like a sponge. And
Yes.
we take up all of the energy and all of the emotions out of the environment. So, compared to a non empath or a non highly sensitive person, in the same situation, we literally hear more, see more, smell more, taste more, feel more, and experience more. So there's a whole lot more of information coming in. And when you don't know how to close yourself off for that, then you're influenced by everything that happens around you, and that then has an impact on your internal world, right?
Right. And I also think that along with that is being able to recognize what is your energy and what is somebody else's energy.
Yes.
And that can is not exactly easy until you really start to pay attention to how you're feeling. I always tell people, pay attention to how you feel before you leave your home, before you interact with anybody. And if you are getting sudden onset of emotions that seem to come out of nowhere when you go to the grocery store or to work, then it's a really good indication that it's somebody else's energies that you're picking up on.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you're sharing this, because this was the thing about myself that I really didn't understand when I was younger. I could be happy and happy, joyful one moment, and then the next moment I could be inconsolably sad. And my mother would ask me, "What's going on?" I don't know. Did you hurt yourself? No, I didn't. Did somebody call you a name? No, nobody called me a name. Did you fall down? No. Why are you crying? I don't know, right? I didn't understand. And I thought that
Mhm.
everything that I was feeling was mine because I'm feeling it. And
Right.
it wasn't until I discovered empath, being an empath, that it is possible to feel other people's emotions as if they are your own. And that was mind blowing, right? Then I thought, oh my God. So, and that explained so much because that explained why I could never say why I was crying. It was not my grief. They were not my tears. When it's not your grief, when they're not your tears, you don't know why you're crying.
Right. And I think that's a really good point too. Not to put any parents down, but in my generation, people, it's like, okay, I'll give you something to cry about. What are you crying for? That kind of thing. And my parents had no idea what was happening with me. And I would often pick up on my parents' emotions. Like there was some depression with my father. And so I was picking up on that, but it wasn't until years later that I recognized that looking back, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I would really turn to things like overeating.
Hmm.
My mom turned to food a lot, and so I would overeat, but I also later learned that food can be very grounding for
Yeah.
empaths.
Grounding, comforting.
Yes. And so, that was some things too that I actually recognized later on and tried to really utilize intuitive eating and not eating when I'm upset or not eating when I'm angry or whatever it might be.
Yes. Yeah, because there are a couple of things in here that I want to talk about because you raised some really excellent points.
Yeah, keep me because I could jump all over the place with this topic.
Exactly. And so it turned out, and I also discovered this later, that my grief was my mother's grief. I was crying her tears. I was crying her sadness, because of things that happened in our past. But we the first thing I think when we feel an emotion is that we can ask ourselves, is this my emotion? That is the first question you should ask yourself. And if it is your emotion, then you know what is causing it. And you might have to think a little bit about it, but when you try, then you usually are able to come up with, oh, it's because I am anxious about this, or it's because I'm sad about that, or it's because I keep rehearsing something that happened, or and there's usually a reason that we can think of for our emotion. When there is really no reason we can think of for the emotion that we are feeling, then it's probably somebody else's. And the
Mhm.
beauty of it being somebody else's is that you can then immediately let it go because you are not responsible for somebody else's emotions and for somebody else's feelings. And this is also something we need to learn because we always want to help other people. So if I discover that I am taking over my friend's sadness, then I want to help her. I want to make her feel better, for instance. But that can only work if she indicates that she wants to feel better, or that she wants to talk about her sadness. And so what a lot of us empaths experience is that we come from a good place, a place of wanting to help, and then we offer solutions or advice, and that's usually not met really well. Usually people are not very happy when we try to do that, and that's because it's uninvited. It's either very confronting for someone, or they haven't addressed their own sadness yet, or they're not ready to do something with it or about it yet, and then we are sort of forcing the issue. As
Mhm.
when we discover that what we are feeling is somebody else's, then from our heart we can send love their way, and we can send an intention their way. As an intention could be, I'm here for you. If you need me, I'm here for you. And then you can let it go, trusting that they will feel this intention. And if it's also good for them, if they are ready for it, that they will reach out to you to talk about it, or to ask your help. And until they do, just let it go.
I love that you brought that up because I've never actually thought about it in that way. I usually what I will do because I didn't mention this, but I'm a clinical social worker, and so I loved when people came to me when I was younger and dumped all their problems onto me. It made me feel good. I didn't realize until later on that it's not necessarily a healthy thing,
Hmm.
and that I can't fix anybody
Hmm.
because as an empath, I just want to help everybody, and you can't always help everyone unless they really are open to it. And you still have to honor your own energy and being careful in that process.
Yes.
And one thing too is that you had mentioned, about letting it go. Some things that I tell people is if you do recognize, let's just say that you don't really know whose energy it is, like you go into a grocery store or to a restaurant and you're just picking up, because we can really get overstimulated.
Yeah.
You're picking up on somebody's emotions. I just tell people just to kind of recognize that, and you can just say, okay, what's theirs is theirs, what's mine is mine. And I tell people to say that 3 times. And you can also brush off the energy. Like sometimes you can feel like almost like something's crawling on you, or you can just feel ucky energy.
Yeah.
And so you can brush it off, but also I always say, imagine it going into the earth to be transmuted. So you're not brushing it off for other people to absorb.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of being grounded, right? Because then you can let the energy go into the earth via the roots that you've created to ground yourself with the earth. And then have the earth transform the emotions into new energy, for instance. So I love that you're saying that because a lot of us, we want to know why. Why am I feeling this way? Where is it coming from? Who is
Yes.
feeling this way, right? But in the end, all of that is none of our business. Our only business is our emotions. So when we've concluded that it's not our emotions because we cannot find a cause for it, then it's best to just let it go and trust that if you are meant to be doing something with it, that the person with the emotions will find you and they will talk to you or they will reach out or something. And until then, it's best to just let it go and let it be with the person that is feeling it. But this is a difficult thing for most of us, and it's really something that we need to learn. And there are lots of techniques that I can learn or I can teach people about how to protect your energy so that you don't constantly feel all of this, so that you can sort of close off your sponge more, which can
Mm-hmm.
be really helpful if you're going into a really crowded shopping mall or into the supermarket or maybe a concert or a movie theater or places where lots of people are, where you don't want to constantly be barraged by all of their emotions and energies. And another thing that you said is the emotional eating. So a lot of us, we are very prone to addiction, and it can be emotional eating. It can also be emotional smoking. A lot of us are emotional smokers.
I used to smoke.
Uh,
Yes.
so it's not because you crave the cigarette or because you crave the nicotine, but because you crave a moment of for yourself, or because the smoke, the warmth is also healing and comforting from the inside, just like the food is comforting and grounding from the inside. So that
Mm-hmm.
makes us feel better. But I've also seen people use drugs or weed or sex or alcohol as an addiction to numb the outside world, because when you don't know how to protect your sponge, then you're taking everything in, and when there's already a lot going on within yourself, then all of that comes on top of it, and then it can really quickly overwhelm us and become too much. And if that goes on for too long of a period, then we can end up in a serious burnout. So many of us have formed an addiction. to get away from it, to not have to feel for a while, or to not have all of those thoughts constantly for a while, not have everything come in for a while.
Yeah, and when you, again, I'm a social worker, so when you're already prone to addiction, like if alcoholism runs in your family, that can be really difficult
Yes.
to, break that and to recognize it, that you are self-medicating and why you are. So it takes a lot of strength for people to recognize these things and know that. My biggest thing was finding those like-minded individuals and knowing that I wasn't alone, because I felt really alone.
Yes. Yeah, that's another beautiful thing to explore, because I remembered the first time I did therapy, and we had to draw our emotions. And I took a black crayon and a white piece of paper, and I just started circling and circling and circling and circling until I had the entire paper circled, and the crayon was gone. And then we needed to name our artwork. And for me, it was the big black hole of gaping despair.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And that came from my loneliness, from my being alone, from my feeling completely alone. And it was in all aspects of my life. It was in school, where I was bullied a lot, where I was called names, where I didn't really have a lot of friends. And the two friends that I did have moved away, far away. So I never got to see or talk to them again. So you're very alone at school. And then I was also very smart child, which doesn't make things easier.
No.
And then at home, I was incredibly alone, because there was a lot of issues between my mom and my dad, and my dad also abusing me, and nobody to talk to, because we've been raised with you don't air your dirty laundry, meaning you don't talk about what's going on. So I was alone everywhere, and there wasn't a place where I could go to. So that ended in that big black hole of gaping despair. That was how I was feeling. And the outward manifestation of that, or one of the outward manifestations of that when I was young, was that I started riding my bike. That's very normal in the Netherlands to go everywhere with your bike. And I didn't pay attention on intersections anymore. I just crossed it, and I thought, if somebody kills me here, I'm fine with it.
Aw, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that's the loneliness, and the deep soul crushing loneliness that I experienced, because the older I get, the more clear it became to me that nobody was like me, and nobody seemed to think like me, nobody seemed to act like me. So there was a big period in my life where I seriously thought there was something wrong with me.
Me too. Oh my gosh, I felt so weird and different than everyone else. And there was a point where I would try, I would try to be this, I don't know if I can swear on here,
Yes, you can.
this badass person and try to ignore how sensitive I was. I'm like, no, you can't mess with me. Yeah, that didn't work out because I was trying to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't.
Yes.
And it just seemed like I kept getting hurt over and over. And that's another part of this too, is that empaths can attract toxic people into their lives. And I kept attracting the same types of people, the codependent, controlling, narcissistic people, mainly in friendships. One after the other, they would take advantage of me. There was no reciprocation. They were just so toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, in friendships, for me, it was also in love relationships. So it was in a lot of different areas, and that's true, because we are so open, and our primary thought is, I want everybody else to have a good time, because then I can have a good time. Well, for most other people, it's, I am having a good time, and I'm doing whatever I need to that I have a good time. So
Mhm.
20% of the world is highly sensitive, and they're then also an empath. Um, 80% of the world is not. We tend to want to think about everybody else around us and make sure that everybody else is taken care of and having a great time and having, what they want in life, while the other 80% mostly focuses on themselves, and not even from a narcissistic point. It's just people think about themselves. It's just the way it is. But because we tend to take care of other people, we are like a flame that draws these people that want to be the center of attention, like the narcissist or the sociopath or the attention seeker or the energy vampire.
The energy vampire, yes.
These are all people who love being the center of attention, who love being taken care of by you, who love coming to you for your help, for your shoulder, for your listening ear, and that suck all of your energy out of you and in general don't give anything back.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that happened to me over and over again. And I was so afraid because I wanted to people please, and I wanted to, this is another thing, I wanted to be liked by everyone.
Mhm.
Now it's like, that's not even possible. You can't be liked. You can't be liked by everyone. And I'm not going to like everyone. I mean, that is just the way it is. There's some people that just don't mesh very well, and that is okay. That's the alignment. You don't have to be in alignment with everyone, and you don't have to stay in a friendship or a relationship anymore if you're not feeling in alignment. And it doesn't have to be out of hatred or anger or bitterness.
Exactly.
Like you said earlier, you can just send them, thank you for coming into my life, and I wish you the best and send you so much love, and break that connection.
Yes. I think that we are people pleasers because we sort of need the validation. I think that we are not liking ourselves. So if
Yes.
other people are liking us, then that sort of proves that we are likable.
Yeah, I like that point, because you're right. My self-esteem and my confidence was so darn low, it's unreal. For the longest time, I had to seek out validation for every little thing. Opinions on just simple dumb decisions, I had to ask. Mainly I would like ask my parents, and I feel like it was more like I was seeking approval
Yes, exactly.
over and over and over again, until I'm like, okay, listen, I am the common denominator here that is attracting these same types of people. So I'm the one that needs to do something to change this. And that is when I really started to learn. But again, it was a process. It did not happen overnight.
No, for sure. And that is, I think, also the reason why so many of us, we start wearing masks. Now, if I look at myself, I had a version of myself for when I was at home with my family. I had a version of myself for when I was with my friends. I think I even had multiple versions depending on with which friend I was. And then I had a version of myself for at work, a version for with my coworkers, a version for with my boss. You want to be the good daughter or the good friend or the good employee or the good boss, depending on what situation you are in. And you then try to act like the person you either think other people want you to be or the person you think you need to be in order to be liked, have a relationship, be a friend, get a certain job. This is what I see happening with a lot of us.
Yes, I agree. And, as you're talking, I'm like, different situations are popping up into my head. And, being a social worker in a really toxic environment, supervisors would often ask me to do things above and beyond, but yet when it was time for like, if I applied for a higher position, I would always get turned down, but yet they would be coming to me for all of these extra things. And that happened so many times in my career.
Yes. Exactly. And so there are a variety of reasons, a broad variety of reasons for why we adjust our behavior. And the most common seen one is that we adjust our behavior when we are applying for a certain job. And then we make sure that we give socially acceptable answers and that we give the answers that we think they want to hear in order for them to hire us so that we get the job.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I didn't realize the extent of it until I had to go for a job interview and I didn't want to have the job. I was already working on my business. I was already clear I want to, continue with my business, but I was still getting a welfare check. And part of the welfare check was that you needed to apply for jobs 4 times a month. So that meant that you needed to go on to job interviews for jobs that I didn't want to have. And that was very liberating because I didn't try to fit myself, my round self or my square self, into a different shaped hole. And I remember one time I was sitting there and there were two of these quite big guy sitting again across from me, and they were like, like man can do, and we're going to ask this little lady all of these questions. And I had made it abundantly clear what type of jobs I was interested in, and then they sent me this job, and it didn't sound like it was a match. So I had expressed my concerns, and they said, no, 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 that's not what's going to be. It's going to be really this, and this, and that was exactly what I wanted. So I said, okay, I'll go. It was a 1.5 hour drive to get there. And then they started asking all of these questions in the direction of which I clearly indicated I had no interest in working in. So at one point I told them, is this really what you're looking for? This, and this? And they said, well, we want to just know what your answers are going to be. So, well, okay, in that case, then I thank you for wasting my time and 3 hours of my driving time on top of it, and I'm ending this interview and I'm leaving. And they were like, well, wait a minute. We were just testing you. I said, I don't appreciate that.
Oh my gosh.
And we finished the interview because they wouldn't let me leave. And surprise of all surprises, the next day I got a phone call saying, you're hired. We think you have enough balls to manage all these men in our department.
That's awesome. So did you take it?
No, because I didn't want the job.
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
And that's a perfect example is when you start to accept who you are, your true, authentic, all the sensitive parts of you, that and that confidence, that's when you start to speak your truth and stand in your truth of who you are instead of trying to change who you are.
exactly.
That's a perfect example of that.
Exactly. So that was eye-opening to me because before then I had always tried to mold myself into the perfect future employee, right? Researching the company, researching the function, and then thinking, how do I need to present myself? Or they would ask questions like, uh, what are some things about you that need improvement?
Or what are your strengths and weaknesses?
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. That was it. What are your weaknesses? And I always hated that question because, how do you answer something like that? And with
That's setting you up to fail. That's how I feel. That's setting people up to fail to ask that type of a question.
right. So I had rehearsed it and I would just say, well, if I'm really in the zone and I'm really focusing and concentrating on my job in order to do it well, I tend to forget to also get coffee for the rest of my coworkers. Right, which is sort of a good answer because you're showing your dedication to your work, and it just means that all other people always do the round for all of the coworkers and come back with coffee, and I never did because I was focused on working. But these are questions that are absolutely horrible, and instead of just being able to be honest, we feel that we need to pretend to be someone or something in order to get something that we want.
Exactly. I have a similar example, but I mean, I
Yes,
wasn't not quite as much as you, but I had started my business and I kind of started my business during the pandemic, not knowing the pandemic was happening, like right before I quit.
Oh yeah.
And I have a holistic healing business, and I started to it was a little bit harder than I thought to get things going, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to interview with this place. It says holistic therapy. So yeah, it was not. And all the questions that the way I answered it was like spiritual, and you could tell it was just not a fit at all. And I'm like, what am I doing? I don't need this. I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to conform again. I'm not going to put myself back into the situation that I left in the corporate world because of my own scarcity mindset. So that's when I really, I had to do a lot of healing once I quit the corporate world. I had to unlearn so many things that I was taught as being a social worker, and the way that you're supposed to act. All the politics involved is unreal. So yeah, that really was an eye opener. I'm like, crap, I have some healing to do surrounding this. I was really, I had some trauma surrounding supervisors and work environments.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I recognize that I had something similar. I think it starts already when we go to school, right? I think we are born into this world perfectly. We are unique, we are wonderful, we have full confidence in ourselves. We believe that eventually we can talk, we believe that eventually we can walk, and we have imaginary friends, and we don't think that that is weird. And we have tea parties with real animals, stuffed animals, grown-ups, with sand cookies and everything, and it's perfectly normal. We don't
Mhm.
question ourselves, we don't question our worth. We are just who we are, and we blab everything out. We are open, we are honest, and we are, what you see is what you get. That's how we are born into the world. And then we go to school. And then in school, we are formed into what's socially acceptable, what we are supposed to be. And also, our parents play a role in this when they say, well, my parents would say, good girls don't sit with their legs wide. And you need to have your legs crossed because you cannot, look and I see your underwear or the crotch of your panties or something like that. And that's just a small example, but it's also you need to cough with your hand in front of your mouth, or all of these things that I call the rules, bullshit rules of society about how things are supposed to be. And this intensifies when we go to school. I compare it often to a sort of like a factory. We go in, and then at the end of the factory, everything comes out more or less the same, when the conveyor belt spits everything out. That's what happens when we go to school, but it takes away the individuality of the child, of the person.
Mhm. And there's different rules for males and females. It's okay if a male sits with his legs open, you know? There's different rules for females, usually in families, starting very young. Like, men are not supposed to wear pink or, girl colors or play with Barbie dolls and things like that at a young age.
Yes,
They're taught that.
exactly. Yes. It's Well, a lot of our limiting beliefs come from there.
Yes.
That's why I call them the rules, the bullshit rules of society. And then we inevitably reach a point where it's no longer working for us, and we have started to survive in the world instead of thrive in the world. And we've created all of these autopilot programs and all of these beliefs that at one point probably helped us, or we thought they helped us, and then another point starts to hinder us. And never once do we question, well, is this true? Why can't I sit with my legs wide? And this is a fairly innocent example, but it goes a lot further than just that. And it's conditioned thinking and conditioned actions that take away the individuality of the person.
Yeah, and I think religious trauma is another big one too.
Yes.
Being taught that you have to believe a certain thing in a certain way, and if you don't, you're going to hell, or whatever the fear-based models are for some people. Um, I get that a lot with my clients, and then it's really hard for them because they're afraid that they're doing something wrong when they're starting to embrace their spirituality, their intuition. But that's probably a topic for another day, but that's just another example of that.
Yes, exactly.
And not to mention, being empaths, we do absorb so much. And here society wants us to have 9 to 5 jobs, oh, you got to take care of the children, you got to get cook dinner, make sure the house is clean. And it's so unrealistic.
Yes. Especially as a woman, because a friend of mine said it really beautifully. He said women are then emancipated, which means that we are working like men, we want jobs like men, we work the hours like men, but we are also running our household and raising our children. And usually the men are not very active in that.
Right.
There are, of course, exceptions to this,
Mhm.
but in general, a woman sort of gets two jobs: the mom in the house and the job.
Well, and again, I think that boils down to feeling like we have to prove ourselves. So
Yes,
we have to do this because this is going to prove that we are good enough and that we can do these things. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way that society has pushed us.
yes,
And
exactly.
so, for an empath, whew, that is so much overstimulation and can drain a person to the point where they can become physically ill
Yes,
because they're
exactly.
not honoring their energy and they're not understanding that they're absorbing all of these things around them. And that's kind of what happened to me. I was off on medical leave for a year and a half
Hmm.
because I didn't know how to protect and cleanse my energy. I didn't know that that was a thing back then.
No, exactly. And
And
so
yeah.
when we're talking about survival skills, the two top ones that I always start out teaching people is first your breath, the power of your breathing and proper breathing, because most of us, when we are unaware, when we are still in the fight or flight or freeze response, we breathe up here. We have shallow chest breathing, and everything that happens with emotions always happens up here, right? We get
Mhm.
a lump in the throat, or pressure on the chest, or stiff neck, stiff shoulders, or we get a headache, or we get tears, or a runny nose. Everything happens up here. So when we're already breathing up here, then it's a very short way to overflowing, and when things just become too much. When we do belly breathing, when we breathe towards our navel or the area right below it, we have more control over our emotions, we have more control over our responses, and this is especially handy for the unexpected things that happen during days.
I agree. And I really do think, the first step too is also recognizing that you're overwhelmed and where are you doing too much? Where is that coming from? How to slow yourself down. And meditation is perfect
Yes,
to gain clarity on, okay, where am I out of alignment and where am I putting too much of my energy? Where's there holes in my energy?
exactly. Yes, exactly. So meditation is a great way of quieting the mind, getting more control over your thoughts, because most of us, we think we are a slave over our, or we are, well, what would be the right way to say it? That we don't have any control over our thoughts, that we are a victim of our thoughts, or that our thoughts just happen, which is not true. We have a lot more control over our thoughts than most of us are aware of. And
Mhm.
by meditating, and meditating can already be just paying attention to your breathing or walking very slowly through the woods. It doesn't have to be in lotus seat, but a lot of people think meditating is. There are a lot of forms that are meditation. So it brings us more control over ourselves and our emotions. And another form that's really important is to be grounded. And we already talked a little bit about it. And when an empath or a highly sensitive person is not grounded, it's a bit like being a 100-year-old tree and you don't have any roots. And if then a storm comes, you keel over. That's when something massively happens in your life. When you're not rooted, you keel over. And that is then where you overflow, where you start crying when you don't want to cry at work, or when you start yelling at your children.
Yes.
Something that's minute and you think, oh my God, and you get a response that you don't want. So by grounding, that acts like the roots would act for a really old tree. And when a tree is properly rooted in the ground and then a storm hits, it sort of leans over. And when the storm is over, it rights itself and it's still there. And it thinks, oh, well, that was that. Right. And you're still there. And that's what grounding does for empaths. It helps us, well, be more resilient to the things that happen in our lives. And there are lots of techniques that I teach people that start with knowing how to ground yourself. And it could be protecting yourself. There are various ways of protecting yourself that start with being grounded really well, or renewing your energy when you're tired, or letting go of energy that you've picked up during the day, or emotions that you've picked up during the day that are not yours, so that you can give it back to the earth to be transformed into brilliant new energy. So both of these techniques in combination with meditation are, I think, the top three most important survival techniques and skills that empaths need.
Well, I am a Reiki master teacher, but I also really love Reiki energy healing, or any type of energy healing. Really, it doesn't have to be Reiki. That truly is what helped me get back and starting to learn all about these things,
Yes.
because I did so much self-healing. But it also, I know I've mentioned this, the mindfulness, your thoughts impact everything in your life. And so really practicing, what does it mean to be mindful, and those negative thoughts, because empaths tend to put themselves down because, they get overwhelmed and feel like they're not good enough. So really being careful of that self-talk is so
Yes,
important.
exactly.
And I love affirmations myself. I know it might not work for everyone, but that really helps to retrain the brain. So that's another really important one that I teach, along with boundaries. Boundaries are so, so, so important for an empath. And
Yes,
I
exactly.
and I teach that too. I didn't have any boundaries. I did not have any boundaries at all. I just let people say or do things, when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I even survive?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm also a Reiki energy healer and a lot of other different types of energy healing. And these are really beautiful modalities that I think I started learning them to be able to help myself. And
Me
now I can
too.
also use them to help other people. So these are beautiful ways of, well, yeah, working with yourself and starting to heal yourself for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I've been loving our talk, Michelle, and I really want to thank you for being here, because I think this is such an important topic. I think it's a make it or break it type of thing for us empaths, because when we don't really know ourselves really well, or know how to operate in this world, then it can be really tough. And this is, I think, for a lot of people, either really eye-opening or maybe really confirming. And I think that that is very important. So thank you so much for being here. And you listeners, viewers out there, I would love it if you could share your biggest insight or your key takeaway in the comments. And I can also imagine that you want to know, where can I find Michelle, or how can I reach Michelle? So how can people find or contact you, Michelle?
My website is peacefuldreamshealing.com. I'm on Facebook as well, under Michelle Kirk. And I also have a private group, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. So pretty much I'm on almost all the social media. And you can send me a direct message or an email as well.
Perfect. I will make sure that all of the links that you've shared with me will also be shared in the description below this video so that it becomes very easy for all of you out there that want to contact Michelle. And for today, I want to thank you for being here, for being a wonderful guest, Michelle. I've loved every second of it. And I look forward to next time that we meet.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored that I was able to be here.
Everybody have a really great rest of your day, and I look forward to inspiring you with another guest on next week's episode. For today, have an amazing rest of your day and talk again soon.